actually, believe it or not, our first trip stop was in Cumberland, Maryland along the CSX Keystone sub. Cumberland, Maryland is home to a few interesting things. On this trip, we found a stack of intermodals sitting under an overpass and the Amtrak station here in Cumberland. Amtrak runs 2 trains a day past this, but it only appears as though they run them late at nights or in early mornings. We then ran around to the east end of the yard and the beginning of the Cumberland sub. We were just in time to see an eastbound manifest departing. It was half intermodal and half manifest, but by the time we got up here to a vantage point to where we could see it, the intermodal's head end and the DPUs had already gotten by us. Next train after that manifest, though, was a coal train led by an ET-44AH. This guy is on his way towards eastern Pennsylvania, where he'll unload and then come back empty in about a few days. Of note, he does have a mid-train DPU in ES-44AH. After leaving Cumberland, our next goal was to find trains on the Maryland Midland Railroad. We ended up running to a place called Keymar, through the trees in the countryside. I will say, though, people are not really good driving here in Maryland, but the views are nice from the hills and the mountainside. Coming into Keymar, we're at this crossing with a connection track into an industry lead. And apparently somebody raises emus here. Hi, emus. There's even some on-track maintenance equipment, pretty old actually, on a dead track next to their main line. Next place we stopped at was in Union City, Maryland, home to the Western Maryland Railroad Museum. Pretty cool they have a semaphore on display here. The museum apparently isn't open on Thursdays. Couple milepost signs sitting over there, and this pretty cool mural honoring the veterans in World War I. Long list of names so they won't be forgotten. Another signal on display on the western side of the depot really caught my attention. And this display, Western Maryland caboose with a couple Western Maryland cars. It's also coincidentally that we got extremely lucky when the Western Maryland was bringing out 4 light engines to head west, probably towards Keymar, to go pick up some cars on that connection we were sitting at about an hour ago. This XCN unit, after doing a little research, came back to GTW at first, Grand Trunk. But after doing a little more research after the trip, found out that this train was actually for the DT&I. Well, not the train, the locomotive was. Still very cool to see. About an hour later, we arrived at our next destination, Seabrook, a MARC station in downtown Washington, D.C. This is Amtrak's Northeast Corridor between Washington and Baltimore, and high-speed rail here. Trains can get up to as much as 135 miles an hour. I was not going to want to miss this. This signal is intermediate, but we do know that the blocks ahead are clear, and it wasn't long until the first Amtrak Acelas train we've ever seen comes flying in at 125 miles an hour. That's what we drove all this way to see. Awesome. A little bit later, we get a traffic light indication here. Green on one side, yellow on the middle, and red on the other end. The red was telling us that there was another train in the area, Hyrex, as a MARC train was coming in from Washington, D.C. And at the same time, another MARC train was coming in from Baltimore, Maryland. Well, so much for the head-to-head meet with these two. I guess that this one coming into the station would be a little bit faster. But I didn't realize at the time he was making a station stop. Oh well. Anyway, this is pretty cool for a couple of reasons. One, I haven't seen Mark in several years. And two, it's my first trip over to the Northeast Corridor. Both momentous occasions. Anyway, the MARC train didn't take long before he started up his journey south into D.C. About another 20 minutes later, another Amtrak train came in. I think this one may have been one of the Northeast Regionals. Not exactly sure. Never did hear the train number. It was still pretty cool to see. He wasn't flying in at 100 miles an hour, but not all the trains on this track will be. Unfortunately, Amtrak does not make station stops here at Seabrook, mostly because it's a MARC station. We spent about another hour at the station and saw 3 more trains, the first being another Amtrak train. This one, though, was running in at about 100 miles an hour, and you could tell I may have been a little bit too close to this track. I will remember that for next time. About another 45 minutes later, another Amtrak Acelas train came flying in, this one doing 135. A little bit later on the middle track, another MARC passenger train comes rolling in. This is a unique setup they have, as the train can run backwards with one of the coaches pulling and have the diesel on the other end for push-pull service. Pretty sweet. Off into the night goes this MARC train on its destination to Baltimore. A little bit later, another MARC train showed up, this time coming south on his way into Washington, D.C. Here, he would make a station stop for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then he would proceed south. I actually did forget to mention Amtrak did give us one more little surprise while this MARC train was pulling out towards DC. Another high-speed Amtrak Acelas train. Not bad for a Thursday here in DC. This would end our time on the Northeast Corridor, as we next would head to another famous rail line. The next day, in the middle of the afternoon, we left the busy, bustling area of Washington, D.C. for another hot spot on our trip. You guys may have heard this one through videos, and there is a live stream cam about it. Cresson, Pennsylvania. Cresson is probably one of the areas you will see the most helper action, as it is also going downhill and uphill towards Horseshoe Curve. Cresson used to stage all their helper sets here, but when these trains got longer and bigger, they decided to stage them in Altoona and down the hill from Cresson. So the service area is not used anymore, but there is a rail park. There's an old Pennsylvania Railroad caboose on display. After doing a little bit of research, this caboose is an original. At the junction called MO, where the track turns into 5, a high green set up for an eastbound autorack train led by a fresh GE rebuild. This train, led by a lone AC-44C6M, is autorack loads and empties coming out of Conway, Pennsylvania, that come off 10 and when he terminates in Conway out of Sterling. It heads east to Newark, New Jersey to be unloaded, and then the cars will be brought back west on 11N. The sound of these eastbound trains going uphill and at Notch 8 is deafening. One of the reasons why we came to the Pittsburgh line. About an hour later, coming down the hill out of Altoona, is a westbound intermodal led by 2 ES-44 DCs. This guy is running past the Cresson Rail Park. He had a helper set push him over the hill at Altoona, and the train will untie here, or at least the helpers will, once this guy gets far enough down the hill. And about the same time, an eastbound intermodal gets started up the hill with a fresh AC-44C6M and a BNSF-944CW in Heritage 2 paint. As soon as the eastbound intermodal train clears, it revealed a SD70 ACU helper set on the other side. These two were on that bottom end of the westbound intermodal. They kicked off while the train was actually running, so the intermodal didn't have to come to a complete stop. And anyways, about a little bit later, these two former UP SD 9043 Max head back east to Altoona for their next assignment to help another train get over the Horseshoe Curve hill. We went to try to find something to eat around Lilly, Pennsylvania, when we happened to notice the headlight of a westbound intermodal with a Dash 9, a C6M, and a fresher C6M. This intermodal is on his way to probably some rail yard in Chicago, not exactly sure where. And apparently on this night, it's a good place for meats, as an eastbound intermodal with two AC44C6Ms, which some of us call toasters, headed east. And then a little bit later, a westbound intermodal, not even 30 seconds after the eastbound cleared, with an Ace, a GE, and another GE rolled slowly westbound. Well, you're not going to believe this, but we found the scrapyard on the north side of Cresson. I think everybody's actually heard about it, though. I don't know. In that yard is a pile of Dash 9 locomotive heads, using for scrap and metal parts. And at the south end, a little bit of a sad sight that made me poop my pants, vomit, and cry at the same time. A row of Dash 8 locomotives, standard cabs no less, slowly getting scrapped and torn to bits. There was one that was actually intact, but we couldn't get close enough. It's sad because these locomotives were a part of my childhood and were always my longtime favorites. I don't have any photos of them in the past, but this is what I can work with. Rest easy in locomotive heaven, Dash 8s. Our next stop on this trip was Dixon, Pennsylvania, at another railroad park. This is above a tunnel that manifests use that intermodals can't. On display here is a PRR signal. This is the famous tunnel at Dixon. The one over on the left is the old Pennsylvania tunnel that was abandoned a while ago. There's even a Pennsylvania Railroad caboose on display. Unfortunately, we did not see any trains here, so we moved on to our next destination. Our next place you may have heard of, you may have seen in videos, you may have seen in magazines. It's what made the Pennsylvania Railroad famous. Well, at least one of the things. Horseshoe Curve. There are no words to describe this place. You have to be there in the moment just to be able to feel it. The display of a GP9 Pennsylvania is awesome as well. It replaced a steam engine that used to sit up here. First train at Horseshoe Curve was the NS 36A, a Conway, Pennsylvania to Edgemoor, Delaware manifest freight. We're containing some Reading and Northern cars, tractors, and does have some DPUs today. Trains coming down the mountain have to go slow because you can tell once they're coming eastbound, they go downhill into Altoona. Coming westbound, it's a nearly 6% grade climbing into the Alleghenies. That's where those pushers and helpers come in. And 36A today is no exception. Midpoint of the train is NS 4049, a lone GE AC 44C6M rebuild converted from an old NS-9. Apart from some tractors on a flat car, the last part of the train contains an SD70 ACU pair that had pushed him up the mountain up to Horseshoe Curve from the west. Our next train on the docket was loaded trash train 63V. Trash loads off the CSAO, Conrail Chair Assets, in Oak Island, New Jersey, en route to Mingo Junction. The train works BRI in Bridgewater, New Jersey. Maybe New York. This is a sound I've wanted to see and hear all trip. Trains screaming uphill on a 6% grade in the rain. Just listen to these GEs struggle. This is the first time that I had ever shot a loaded trash train, or that I've actually ever shot a train at Horseshoe Curve. When I was last here 12 years ago, I didn't have a camera or phone, so I wasn't able to shoot anything. I gotta tell you though, these trash cars, even though they looked impressive, they smelled really bad. And finally, this is another sound I wanted to hear. SD70 ACUs in Notch 8 shuffling the train uphill into the Alleghenies. A little bit later, heading downhill, is another intermodal train with an AC 44C6M and an SD70 ACE. Many rail fans call this a trail fail when the EMD is not leading, and this was the case today. But I still had fun no less shooting trains going around Horseshoe Curve finally for the first time. Plus, this intermodal train smelled much better than the trash train that kind of smelled like straight diarrhea. Our next place on the trip was another famous place of the Pennsylvania Railroad, Altoona, Pennsylvania, home to PRR's Juniata Shops. We set up on a walkway just above the Amtrak station here in Altoona as we heard that a loaded NS coal drag was coming in. We can get the symbol on this guy. Another trail fail again, with an AC 44C6M leading and an SD70A second out. Didn't see any helpers on this guy. It's possible they could have detached a little bit up the hill from here once they got over the summit. For some unknown reason, this cold drag completely slowed to a stop, but a few seconds later he got going again. This provides a good look into the cars with the loaded coal. Just then, a westbound manifest came flying in, led by an AC-44C6M Solo. This is NS train 39G. Manifest out of Pavonia, New Jersey, headed for Conway, Pennsylvania. "39G was pretty good size today, and he had something I wasn't used to seeing: 3 rear DPUs. At first I thought these were just the DPUs he needed, but I realized the AC-44C6M was the DPU that came out of Pavonia, and the 2 ACUs were there at the bottom of Altoona to help push. It sounded pretty cool. Next, westbound behind 39G was another intermodal. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the symbol of this guy either. He was kind of mumbling a little bit. Anyway, he had 2 AC-44C6Ms sandwiching an SD-70 Ace. Next thing we decided to check out was NS's Juniata Shops, originally built by the PRR. And there's Tyler doing a little victory dance. In the storage line was NS 1074, the Delaware-Lackawanna Heritage Unit, along with some Conrail trailers. In one part, sitting off by their own, was an NS-9 in the 9600 series, an NS GP60 with a Conrail fan on top, and then NS 1801. The yellow bonnet, yellow and silver. This was a very awesome sight to see, because we had never actually checked out Juniata Shops before. The next part was the roundhouse part. Apart from that bottom part of the locomotive, you can see NS-944CWs, -940CWs, SD-70 Aces. There's a high hood in there somewhere, AC-44C6Ms. See, there's the high hood that I pointed out. More -9s. And then this thing, an old NS road switcher. Pretty cool. We had gotten an update about NS-10G having the Monongahela Heritage Unit number 8025 leading its solo, so we beat it back up to the Amtrak station to watch him coming in. A little bit later, here he was. As advertised, the Monongahela was leading solo. Another cool sight behind him was a string of those refrigerated boxcars. I think they were loaded. We get a nice view of him as he passes one of the Pennsylvania Railroad museums in the background. 10G is manifest traffic out of Conway, Pennsylvania to Enola, Pennsylvania. Along his route, he will come in here to Altoona's Rose Yard to do some work and do a crew swap at the other end of Altoona. Then he'll continue east. Midpoint in the train is a Union Pacific ES44AC acting as a solo mid-train unit in between some Canadian Pacific covered hoppers. I forgot to mention to you guys that CP and KCS back on April 14th had merged together to form Canadian Pacific Kansas City. I'll be posting a video of that eventually and maybe doing a little bit of a history background between the two. Among some of the cars that they'll drop in here are these locomotive wheel sets that Juniata will use for other locomotives. We did see those get dropped into the shop later on, but we couldn't get it close enough to get video of it. The SD70 ACU helper set, which normally detaches from the train up the summit from here, about a mile or so back, decided it would be worth the time to hitch a free ride into the yard, since they have to go turn around anyway and get themselves set for the next train that has to go up the summit. About an hour or so later, another manifest heading eastbound comes in. I don't think this guy was going to go work the yard. I think he was just going to the other end for his crew change. Led by an SD70 ACE and a -944CW, the train sneakily glides in. We actually almost missed this guy because we didn't hear him call any symbols out over the radio. The trash in these cars actually smelled so bad it made me, Tyler, and Rex almost vomit and puke and cry uncontrollably. But we kept our composure and still rolled on. About another 20 minutes later, after the eastbound manifest cleared, another manifest came out westbound out of Rose Yard in Altoona. This train was being led by an ES44DC, a -944CW, another UP ES44AC, and an NS SD70 ACU. I thought that all the ACUs were designated to helper service in Altoona, but it turns out there's still some left out there that are still running as road units. The surprises got even better when Amtrak 43, the Pennsylvanian, rolled into town heading westbound to Pittsburgh. He's making a station stop here. Of note is the Amtrak Phase 2 Heritage Unit doing this job solo. Pretty cool surprise, as we weren't expecting to see any Amtrak trains on this trip, or for that matter of fact, any Amtrak Heritage units. some on and some off, and Amtrak 43 continues on his way west towards Pittsburgh. At last, the helper set of this manifest appears. This is the part that I've wanted to hear and that I love hearing. ACUs in high gear. There's just no other locomotive that can sound like EMDs do. Our next spot was Cassandra Railfan Overlook, a railfan spot in between Lilly and Portage, Pennsylvania on the Pittsburgh Main. These metal fences here are placed here in case of rock slides or any debris falling. That way they won't impede the movement of trains and keep traffic flowing until maintenance can deal with it. When we arrived here, that manifest that we saw that met the Amtrak train back in Altoona was already coasting downhill from here. The helper set was actually still on the back. The curve provides a nice elevated view of trains rolling uphill. It wasn't all that bad. We ended up catching another NS westbound manifest, this one led by an SD70 ACE and a GE rebuild AC44C6M coasting downhill. The shot on the curve Oh great, more bad-smelling trash cars and some waste cars. Yes, those epic containers you saw are actually filled with human and other kind of waste. Gross. Midpoint of the train is an NS ES44AC acting as a mid... We'll end the day here at Cresson. Here we see two eastbounds lined up past the junction here at MO. The first eastbound is a helper set returning after having shoving one of those manifest trains downhill past Portage. This guy's going back to Altoona to wait for another westbound that'll need assistance getting up over the hill at This next question has some meaning to it. Do you guys remember those SD70 M-2s that were labeled in the 26, 27, and 28? Well, the second to last train was an eastbound intermodal with a 2700 series NS SD70 M-2 second. NS had recently brought these things back out of retirement and have given them fresh paint and updated software. Pretty cool, as I haven't shot one of these since I was younger. Unfortunately, I don't have any videos or footages of that, but I finally got my chance here. Pretty cool sight. There are those SD70 ACUs that are used on road freights and not as DPUs, well, pushers at least. This one is a mid-train DPU, and he's pushing as hard as he can getting up that hill.
This next train would be the last and final one we would shoot on our trip here. It got too dark to film the other trains, so we didn't do that. But thank you guys for joining along and seeing where we went to and what we caught. This opened up a whole new window. At milepost MO on the Pittsburgh line, this is CSC Productions, and I'll see you guys again next time. Be sure to come back or else you'll probably make me cry and vomit violently and have explosive diarrhea. You wouldn't want that to happen, would you?